June, a Friday. And if you're superstitious, I can tell you not to worry about it because you're already lucky. Having found the program. Good morning. This is Clean and Sober. My name is Steve Martorano. His name is Gary Hendler. Hello, Gary.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
And we're here each and every Friday morning at WWDB AM 860. And what we do on Clean and Sober, as you might imagine, is discuss addiction and recovery. We like to say at the beginning of every program that if you leave at the end of the program with only one thought in your head, it's that there is help out there. That's what we try to bring the show in around that issue. Addiction, big problem. We all know about it. Today we got an interesting take on it, Gary. I know Gary's looking forward to talking about this. We're gonna talk about kids and drugs. I hear you. Oh, kids and drugs. Another kids and drugs show. You know what? It's I believe grown increasingly difficult to have an impactful conversation with your kids on this issue.
Or on anything.
Perhaps. You may be right about that. That's true as well. Because of the current mania for the legalization of marijuana. I think that's changed the dynamic pretty dramatically. Going forward, it's going to become a very interesting conversation with your kids about that. More specifically to the point, we want to talk to people who are in successful recovery, and there are loads of you out there. You call us every week. You share your stories with us, and we're always grateful for that. I want to move it a little bit away from your personal experience with your stories of recovery and talk about how you used your experience to talk to your kids about these problems, or now your grandchildren. Baby boomers got grandchildren now. Is it helpful? Can it be a detriment? Does it give you more credibility on the issue of drugs and alcohol? Does it give you less credibility? Because in a strange sense, Gary and I have talked about this, it can be problematic, particularly, ironically, if you're in recovery. Because as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find it with, if you're in successful recovery, the kid says, well, Dad or Mom, you did it. You turned out fine.
How bad can it be?
How bad can it be? Exactly.
So there's this great irony in recovery when it comes to your family and your children, that it not become a kind of license to go ahead and experiment with drugs or alcohol. You cannot allow, it would seem to me, your positive experience of recovery to be used as an excuse for the kids to go, how bad can it be?
I think at that point you need to use statistics to show that most people don't make it. And if you are in successful recovery, you can tell your kids how many people didn't make it. Dead didn't make it.
In addition to which, we know from all the data that this disease of addiction is a disease that runs through families. So everything else we've said about, cautionary tales and having a dialogue with your kids and keeping an eye on them is made all the more critical for people who have had this disease in their family, because we know it occurs throughout families. There is clearly some sort of inherited or learned experience that addicts can pass on.
And what I have found, Steve, is the recovering addicts are hypersensitive on this issue with kids, whereas if a parent that hasn't gotten into trouble, they might not take it as seriously as somebody who has been through this themselves.
So to the extent you're willing to share these stories with us, we're very appreciative. As we said, every week, lots of folks call, share their stories with us. We now want to expand beyond your personal experience with addiction and recovery to discuss how you dealt with it in your family, with your children. What are you telling them? Are they listening? As Gary said, it's always hard to get them to listen to anything. This is something they must listen to and must be aware of. So we're live. We remind you of that every week. This is not canned. You can call and talk to us right now, and we really hope you'll do that today, because this can be very, very valuable. 610-664-4100. Call through. Tim will put you on the air. We promise you won't have to hang long. This isn't sports radio or political radio.
That's correct.
We can get you on very quickly. And again, we say it every week, say it again. People's personal testimony in this area is very powerful. Others hear this. I think it can help a lot of people. So how do you deal with it around your house? Gary, let me tell you exactly why I thought of this as a topic. I don't know whether you watch the program Louis. The comedian Louis C.K. has an absolutely amazing program called Louis. It's on Fox FX, I think.
When is it on?
It's on Monday nights. Now, he's a comedian, and over the years I've been watching it. It's wildly funny, hysterically funny. But this current season, which just concluded, I think, last week, has been somewhat different, where Louis delved into family issues, some really interesting family issues. The concluding episode last week, an hour and a half, is what happens when Louis sees his 12-year-old daughter smoking marijuana. It's one of the most powerful and interesting looks at how a dad reacts to that moment. And I won't go into great lengths about it, but he offers no real solutions, except that he tries to support his daughter at the end of the program and let her know that she's loved and that he's only worried about her. But there's no preaching, and it's really a reflection on Louis's life. Because Louis, like many of us, grew up in a drug culture. He's used drugs, and he finds himself in that bind. How do I act as a parental authority here when I've experimented with it, when I have experience with it? She probably knows that. How do I deal with this? And they flash back to show you what happened to Louis when he was in middle and then high school, and he was experimenting with drugs. If you saw the program, it was very powerful. But again, as I said, it's honest enough that he doesn't leave you at the end with a prescription on how to deal with this. Because I don't know that there is a prescription on how to deal with this.
There's no text on this. You know, that reminds me, I remember the first time I saw my daughter smoking a regular cigarette. How can I say it's bad for you, can't smoke, when I used to smoke and still smoke cigars? So it's that contradiction constantly. And as we're going to talk about more with the advent of marijuana becoming legal, and it will become legal in this state also, how do you tell them not to smoke when everybody's going to be doing it?
Yeah, there are loads of programs. They've been in the schools for years, trying to alert kids to the dangers of drug and alcohol. To the extent it's working good, it doesn't appear to be. It seems that the problem of drugs and alcohol in schools and in colleges is as big and growing bigger all the time. And as, again, the audience that we have here is unique. It is unique. These are people who have been there and done that. Now, the uniqueness is either good or it can be bad. Because as you said, they can look at you and go, hey, you cleaned up. What's the big deal? So how have you dealt with it? Has it come up? Do you find that people, I'll ask Gary, do you find that people with and Gary's 32 years sober, and you would put your drug experience up against anybody.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of experience with how bad this can be.
As they say, I've earned a seat.
Yeah, you're in
AA.
You're in the room for sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. I'll ask you directly. Do you think it has enhanced your credibility, diminished your credibility, or do you think at the end of the day it doesn't matter?
I think it has enhanced my credibility. I can only speak about my kids. They grew up with me sober, knowing me sober. They never saw me stoned. And they see the reaction I get from other people, the respect I get. They see what happens in a meeting, an anniversary meeting. They're sitting there. They see the whole thing. So I think it has enhanced my credibility. I do.
Well, we want to hear from others who have either that experience or any other experience. Have you been honest with the members of your family? I understand that's sort of a cardinal tenet in recovery, is that you be honest, correct?
Yeah, I'm totally honest.
Very difficult, though, to share these kinds of stories with kids and hope that they don't just roll their eyes. Because, you get that.
Well, of course. I mean, nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. It's like nobody thinks they're going to get caught and go to jail if they commit a crime. So you can only do your best. You can only lead by example. Never know what's going to happen.
610-664-4100. If you have had the occasion to have this conversation with your kids, particularly, and guys, Gary makes a great point, particularly those of you who have achieved your sobriety relatively recently, in other words, within the lifetime of your children, so they could be aware of what was going on, so they could see what your behavior was like. And now they see you recovering. Has that helped the situation? Is it a cautionary tale for them? Or do they just go, he screwed up, I won't? I mean, kids are, you're right, they think they're immortal. They don't think it's going to happen to them. No one does. I don't think if you say to them, I screwed up, you can too, they're going to particularly respond to that. You think?
I agree with you totally. I was just thinking, they have the program Scared Straight.
Yes.
For offenders, young offenders. I think they should have a program bringing kids into these rehabs and see what some of these people look like who are strung out on drugs. Might help somebody.
Yeah. Well, there are loads of programs that have been in school for a lot of years. To the extent that they are helpful, good. I mean, I wonder about them. The DARE program has been in I think elementary schools for years and years now. Another irony of that program is that for many of those very young children, the DARE program is the first time they ever hear about drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the DARE program, they might not have heard about it. And look, we raise this topic because I do believe that the coming legalization of marijuana, and it's almost certainly going to become more widely legalized recreationally. It's just a matter of time. Right now in 2 states, many more states have medical marijuana situations. It's just going to expand across this country. How is that going to impact the parents' ability to warn kids? They already have their hands full with drinking. Already have their hands full with telling them not to drink. And one wonders what's going to happen when marijuana. I can imagine a situation where your kid, 15, 16, experimenting with marijuana gets caught. You try to have a conversation about it. And I'm sure the kid's thinking, if we were in Washington, this would be a different conversation we'd be having.
But Steve, aren't there still going to be restrictions on the marijuana?
Sure there are. There are restrictions about alcohol, too. Has it stopped teenage drinking?
No, not at all. It's going to be the same thing, just another product.
Well, that's what I keep thinking. I keep thinking that, yes, they're going to legalize a substance. The overwhelming majority of people will probably be able to deal with it responsibly, and that X number will not. And that number is only going to be added to the number of problems we already have.
Right, so I don't get it.
So how can people not think that there is a looming problem out there? Sooner or later, it's gonna catch up to us.
Seriously, I know I'm hypersensitive to drugs and alcohol, but it really doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't. What's the benefit? People are going to make money from it.
There's the long and short of it. I got a prediction, by the way. I wanted to make this prediction publicly so people will know they heard it here first. Among the many, and Gary and I are not arguing for the prohibition of marijuana or the criminalization of it. That has been a disaster. It's been a disaster. We all know the war on drugs is a failure. But you have to be careful what you wish for. Because as the saying goes, more tears have been shed over answered prayers than unanswered prayers. So this is just a cautionary tale. One of the most insidious examples of the dangers of this thing, this legalization of marijuana, is this whole edible marijuana industry. You can already see that the business ethic has taken hold here now. In other words, if marijuana is going to become a legal business, people are clever enough to know, I don't want to get into a business where the only way to deliver the product is smoking. Because no matter what we think about marijuana versus tobacco, we are fairly well established as an anti-smoking society. So why would I get involved in a product that you smoke? People don't like it. They don't like smoke. They don't want you to light. So let's put it in some other form.
That's a great point.
Let's put this.
That is great.
So they've made it edible, and we know from our experience and from history that you've always been able to put marijuana in brownies and eat it and ingest it. Now, that's not good enough. I don't want to be in the brownie business. I want to be in the candy business. I want to make lollipops that deliver marijuana or THC, the active ingredient. I want to make candy bars.
It's happy. It's happy time.
Because nobody will care if you open a candy bar after dinner and munch it, or you're sucking on a lollipop in the subway. No one's going to object. Now, here's my prediction. Here's my prediction. We have yet to see or experience a Halloween in Washington or Colorado, the two states where it's legal, where edible marijuana is being sold. Sure as we're sitting here, the trick-or-treaters are going to wind up with that stuff in their bags. Sure as we're sitting here, you heard it here first, you will hear stories of youngsters who have been trick-or-treating and got this stuff, and then suddenly all those people who think marijuana legalization is a good idea are going to, I think, have second thoughts.